Beneath your feet, right now, a world exists that you've probably never seen. A world of endless tunnels, dripping walls, and complete darkness. It stretches beneath cities, under sidewalks, beyond the reach of sunlight and sound. And in that world, something might be alive. For nearly a century, Americans have whispered about it. A creature, cold-blooded and ancient, swimming silently through the sewage of New York City. They call it the sewer gator, a reptilian survivor of our own neglect, flushed as a pet, grown in the dark, mutated by mystery. Crazy, right? But what if the legend wasn't just a story? What if there have been sightings? What if science has tried to bury the truth? But the myth keeps crawling back, because sometimes what we fear the most is not what's above ground, it's what's lurking below. Have you ever paused during a quiet walk through the city, any city, and glanced down at the rusted iron grate below your feet? Have you ever wondered what might be hiding beneath the surface, deep within the darkness when no sunlight ever reaches? Beneath the concrete jungle of America's cities lies a different world, one that most people never think about. A world of narrow passageways, dripping pipes, stale air, and echoing silence. A world that breathes quietly beneath our feet, unseen, forgotten, and perhaps not entirely empty. This is where the legend begins. It starts not with facts, but with whispers, not with scientific papers, but with stories passed from one voice to another. The kind of stories told late at night, with the lights low and the windows shut. Stories that sound too strange to be true, but too detailed to ignore. And in these stories, there's always something lurking down there. Something cold, something ancient, something reptilian. They call them sewer gators. The legend of the sewer gator has been a part of American urban folklore for nearly a century. It speaks of enormous alligators living in the sewer systems of major cities, especially New York. These creatures, the legend says, swim silently through the tunnels, feeding on rats, growing larger, stronger, more cunning. But is any of it true? That question has fascinated and terrified generations of Americans. Parents warn their children. Teenagers dare each other to peek into storm drains. Tour guides mention it with a wink. And somewhere in the minds of millions, the image of a pale, blind, mutated gator crawling through the sewers has taken root. But where did this strange story come from? Who first told it? And why has it survived for so long? To answer that, we need to step back in time. Back to the early 1900s. An era of rapid urbanization. New York City was booming. Skyscrapers rising, trains rumbling, and underground tunnels expanding at an incredible pace. As more pipes were laid and new sewers dug, the hidden world below the city became larger and more complex. Perfect, perhaps, for secrets. Meanwhile, another trend was taking off: vacations to Florida. Wealthy families from the Northeast would escape the cold winters by heading south, and during their trips, they often encountered something fascinating: alligators. These wild, exotic reptiles were strange and thrilling to northern visitors. Some began bringing baby alligators home as pets. Tiny creatures that could fit inside a shoebox, purchased from roadside vendors or caught from the wild. But there was a problem. Alligators, even when small, grow fast. Within months, that cute little reptile could become a dangerous animal. Snapping jaws, unpredictable behavior, and no clear way to keep it in a city apartment. So what did people do? Some may have released them into local ponds. Others gave them to zoos, or simply abandoned them. And then there are the darker stories. The ones that claim owners flushed their alligators down the toilet, believing the sewers would carry them away forever. But what if they did not die? What if they survived? That question, half fear, half fascination, was enough to spark a legend. And by the 1930s, it had fully taken shape. Newspapers of the time began to feed the flames. Headlines shouted of gators spotted in the Bronx. Articles described children encountering reptiles in unexpected places. One particularly famous story came in 1935, when the New York Times published a piece titled, "Alligator Found in Uptown Sewer." It described a group of teens who pulled a 125-pound gator from a manhole near Harlem. Whether it was true or exaggerated no longer mattered. The story had spread. The idea had entered public imagination. And from that point forward, sewer gators were no longer just whispers. They were part of America's modern mythology. But even legends need a foundation. Something real. Something visible. So is there any truth to it? Could an alligator, flushed into a cold, toxic sewer system, actually survive? Could it feed on rats and trash and grow larger, year after year, hidden in the tunnels beneath our feet? Scientists say no. Zoologists, biologists, and animal control experts all agree. Alligators are cold-blooded creatures. They need warmth to survive. The average temperature of New York's sewer system will be far too cold for an alligator to live in, especially during winter. Add in the lack of sunlight, clean water, and adequate food, and survival becomes nearly impossible. Still, the stories persist. By the time the 1930s rolled around, New York City had become a metropolis of ambition. Towers scraping the sky and trains burrowing through the earth. People were busy, streets were crowded, and the city pulsed with energy from morning to midnight. But even as life thrived above ground, strange whispers began to echo below. The first spark that turned rumor into something resembling reality came on a chilly day in 1935. A group of teenagers were reportedly shoveling snow off the sidewalk near East 123rd Street in Harlem. One of them looked down into an open manhole. What he saw made him freeze in place. A flash of movement, the glint of eyes, the unmistakable ridges of a reptilian tail. An alligator. They yelled for help. Ropes were brought. Hooks were lowered. And after a frantic, almost cinematic struggle, they managed to pull a squirming 7-foot-long alligator from the sewer. A journalist got wind of the story. It landed on the pages of the New York Times under the headline, "Alligator Found in Uptown Sewer." And just like that, everything changed. The article described the animal in detail. Its weight, its color, the reactions of bystanders. It painted a scene that felt both ridiculous and terrifying. A creature that belonged in a Florida swamp had appeared under a Manhattan street. It was the kind of story that made readers both laugh and glance nervously at the storm drain near their home. Experts at the time speculated wildly. Was it a hoax? An escaped pet? A freak accident? But the truth hardly mattered anymore. Once a legend makes it to the front page of a respected newspaper, it becomes something more than gossip. It enters the bloodstream of public imagination. It becomes possible. And with that single report, the legend of the sewer gator was no longer confined to dark corners and children's stories. It was now part of the public record, something that could be quoted, shared, and feared. From that moment forward, the stories grew. People began to report strange sounds coming from beneath manhole covers. Some claimed to see claw marks on pipes or large shadows moving through underground tunnels. A plumber in Brooklyn allegedly refused to go into certain sewer lines unless accompanied. A city worker told reporters about hearing hissing noises when he lifted a drain cover. Even without proof, these stories multiplied because they tapped into something deeper, a fear of what we cannot see. You see, sewers are unlike any other space in the urban world. They are vast, unlit, humid, and echo with the sounds of flowing water and shifting metal. For most people, they are utterly alien. You can walk the same block for years and never consider the labyrinth below, and that makes them perfect for mystery. If you told someone a giant lizard lived in the park, they would laugh and look. If you said it lived in the sewer, they would shiver and wonder. The psychology behind it is fascinating. It reveals how fear thrives in the unknown. People are naturally curious, but also naturally cautious. And when something is placed in a place we do not understand, like a sewer, it feels more believable, not less. Hollywood noticed this. By the 1950s, the idea of creatures living in the sewer had become a recurring theme in horror films and pulp fiction. A 1959 novel titled The World Beneath the City helped to popularize the myth even further. It described mutant alligators growing to massive sizes in the dark, feeding on garbage and terrorizing maintenance workers. The story was gripping, and it felt just believable enough to send chills down readers' spines. By the 1980s, the myth had fully evolved. Movies like Alligator in 1980, a cult classic, portrayed a flush pet growing into a monstrous beast in the sewer, feeding on carcasses and escaping to the surface. It was cheesy, over the top, and unforgettable. but it was also a mirror, reflecting the very real idea that we are afraid of what lives just beneath us. Children in schools whispered about sewer gators. Cartoon shows joked about them. Even toy companies sold plastic mutant alligators that glowed in the dark. The line between truth and entertainment had blurred completely. And yet, every few years, reality would interrupt the fantasy. Reports emerged, not from New York, but from cities like Miami, Orlando, and especially Gainesville, Florida, of actual alligators turning up in storm drains. Animal control officers were dispatched. Cameras were lowered into pipes. And what they found was undeniable. Live gators crawling through narrow tunnels, just a few feet from where people lived. They were not mutants. They were not albino, but they were real. And that was enough to make the old stories feel a little less far-fetched. Because if it could happen in Florida, who is to say it never happened in New York? It is the space between impossible and unlikely that keeps a legend alive. And as long as that space exists, the sewer gator will remain more than just a myth. It will stay in the shadows, in the stories, in the minds of those who dare to wonder what else might be lurking below. Legends are not just born from imagination. They are built, layer by layer, fear by fear, and detail by detail. And few urban legends have endured as stubbornly as the tale of the sewer gator. Even in an age of smartphones, GPS, and 24-hour surveillance, the idea of giant reptiles lurking beneath our cities still captures attention. Why? Because it taps into something primal. We are wired to be suspicious of the unknown, the spaces we cannot see, the places that feel separate from the world we understand. And nothing represents that disconnect better than the sewer. Sewers are hidden. They are humid, foul-smelling, and architecturally ancient. Their tunnels run for miles underneath neighborhoods, businesses, and schools. Entire underground maps exist, maps that most residents will never see. And it is within this unknown that stories like the sewer gator thrive. But there is more to it. The sewer gator story endures not only because it is scary, but because it is believable enough. Let's break it down. First, the premise. A pet alligator bought in Florida by an unsuspecting family grows too large and becomes unmanageable. Fearing for their safety or simply not knowing what else to do, they flush the animal down the toilet. This action, as absurd as it sounds, mirrors real historical behavior. In the early 1900s, exotic pet ownership was poorly regulated. Zoos were inaccessible. Veterinary care for reptiles barely existed. Flushing an animal was, to some, seen as a solution. Second, the setting. The New York City sewer system is massive. Over 6,000 miles of tunnels snake beneath the metropolis. Some are wide enough to drive a truck through. Others are barely large enough for a child to crawl. The idea that something, anything, could live down there undetected feels possible. Third, the creature itself. Alligators are terrifying. Their prehistoric look, their silent movement, their explosive bite, all contribute to their status as apex predators. When placed into an unfamiliar environment like a sewer, they become even more mysterious. What would they eat? Would they mutate? Would they breed? Those are the questions that fuel campfire conversations, horror novels, and viral TikToks. And fourth, we want to believe. As humans, we are drawn to myths that straddle the line between truth and fiction. We like the idea that something unusual might exist just outside the bounds of science. It is why Bigfoot never dies, why UFO sightings surge, why the Loch Ness Monster still earns tourism dollars in Scotland. It is not just about fear. It is about possibility. And the sewer gator embodies that perfectly. It is just believable enough to raise eyebrows. Just mysterious enough to remain unsolved. But let us shift perspectives. What do scientists say? Biologists will tell you that it is highly unlikely for an alligator to survive in the sewers of New York City. The reasons are simple. Temperature. Alligators are cold-blooded and require warm environments to regulate their body temperature. Sewer systems in northern cities, especially in winter, are far too cold for long-term survival. Light. Alligators are dependent on sunlight for thermoregulation and healthy development. Complete darkness for extended periods leads to physical and behavioral issues. Food supply. While sewers do have rats and other organic waste, the ecosystem is not sufficient to support a large reptile long-term. Toxicity. The combination of industrial runoff, waste, and chemicals in sewer systems would eventually prove fatal to most reptiles, including gators. So, scientifically speaking, the odds are stacked against the legend. Yet, there have been documented cases of short-term survival. In several instances, alligators have been found alive in storm drains in southern states. These were usually smaller specimens, perhaps recently introduced to the system, and likely unable to survive long without intervention. But their existence proves that survival, while rare, is not impossible. And when something is not impossible, it becomes myth-worthy. Which brings us back to the heart of the story. The sewer itself. Sewers are the perfect myth incubators. They are underground, they are difficult to access, and they are rich with mystery. To most of us, they are simply a manhole cover we walk past, a trickle of water we hear beneath the sidewalk. But to the mind that wanders, to the imagination, they are tunnels to another world. Think of how often tunnels appear in fiction as passages to the unknown. Whether it's horror, science fiction, or fantasy, the underground is a place where rules change, where strange creatures hide, where secrets are buried. And when you consider that the sewer gator does not just seem like a monster, it becomes a symbol of what we choose to ignore, a reflection of our anxieties, a living question mark. Are there creatures living below our cities? Probably not like the ones in the stories. Not 12-foot, red-eyed beasts with venomous bites and mutant DNA. But the legend continues to slither through our culture, because some part of us wants it to, because when we peer down into the dark, we are not just looking for gators. We are looking for what we fear the most, the unknown. The 20th century was a golden age for strange stories. Radio, television, comic books, and later the internet all became platforms where urban legends could thrive, evolve, and spread like wildfire. And the story of the sewer gator was no exception. Once it left the sewers of New York and entered American imagination, it was unstoppable. It began with local whispers. Then it made the headlines. And then something else happened. It made it to the movies. In 1980, a low-budget horror film simply titled Alligator premiered in American theaters. The plot? A baby alligator, flushed down the toilet in the 1960s, survives in the sewers. But not just survives, it thrives. Feeding on discarded lab animals injected with growth hormones, the alligator mutates into a massive, unstoppable predator that eventually escapes to the surface and terrorizes a city. The movie was outrageous, bloody, campy, but it was also popular. Audiences were hooked. The film made money. And more importantly, it cemented the idea of gators in the sewers into American pop culture forever. Suddenly, the sewer gator was no longer just a whispered urban myth. It was an entertainment trope, a symbol of all things gross, creepy, and thrilling. And Hollywood was just getting started. Over the years, references to sewer alligators began popping up everywhere, from cartoons to sitcoms to children's books. Animated shows like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles used the sewer setting to blend danger, mystery, and fantasy. Movies like Batman Returns feature grotesque villains lurking beneath the city, reinforcing the idea that the underground world was home to things best left unseen. Even Disney took its turn. In the film The Princess and the Frog, the lovable Louis the alligator lives in the bayous of Louisiana, but his origins tap into the same cultural familiarity, with reptiles living just out of sight. By the 1990s, late-night comedians, comic strips, and even toothpaste ads were using the sewer gator legend to get a laugh or raise an eyebrow. And then came the internet. With the rise of YouTube, Reddit, and online forums, a new generation discovered the legend. Grainy videos began circulating, claiming to show large shadows moving in tunnels. Blog posts and clickbait articles asked, could it be real? Some even claimed to have seen it with their own eyes. Of course, most of these stories were fabricated, or at best, misunderstood. A large lizard becomes a gator. A raccoon becomes a monster. A sewer maintenance video, shot in bad lighting, becomes proof. But no matter how many times experts debunked the claims, the public's fascination only grew. Because it was never about whether the story was true. It was about how it felt. and the legend felt exciting. There's a reason stories like this thrive. They are self-replicating. Each retelling makes a legend a little bigger, a little weirder, a little more alive, and every generation adds its own twist. In the early 2000s, memes began surfacing with gators poking their heads out of toilets. Video games featured mutated reptiles as sewer bosses. Kids dared each other to explore drainage ditches, hoping to find something strange. The sewer gator had officially become folklore. But unlike ancient legends tied to religious or cultural heritage, this one was born in a modern city, in concrete, in steel. It was urban in every sense of the word. A creature not of wilderness or mythic forest, but of plumbing, sanitation, and waste. It is a reminder that even in an age of skyscrapers and Wi-Fi, our minds still make space for monsters. And in a way, the sewer gator is a perfect modern myth. It is not majestic. It is not magical. It does not offer wisdom or prophecy. It simply lurks, waiting, watching, living just beneath the world we know, ready to remind us that for all our progress, some fears still crawl in the dark. Pop culture gave the sewer gator a life of its own. It became a joke, a movie monster, a Halloween costume. But beneath the humor, something real lingered, a question we still ask, even now. What if that story from 1935 was not just a one-time incident? What if there are places beneath our cities that we still do not fully understand? What if legends are just waiting for us to notice them again? That is the secret to a good urban legend. It hides in plain sight. It adapts with the times. And most importantly, it never gives a clear answer. Because once a legend is explained away, it dies. But when it leaves questions behind, it grows stronger. So the next time you see a movie that shows a scaly monster bursting out of a manhole or a comedy sketch about a sewer gator wearing sunglasses, remember, there's a reason those images still appear. Because something about them sticks. Because somewhere deep inside, we still wonder, could it be real? As much as the sewer gator legend has lived in books, movies, and internet forums, every so often reality nudges its way in. And when it does, the legend grows teeth. Let's be clear. Most scientists agree that alligators cannot survive in the cold, dark, and chemically toxic sewers of northern cities like New York or Chicago for any extended period. They lack the warmth, the food, and the light necessary to stay alive. But impossible is a strong word, and nature has a way of surprising even the most confident experts. Over the years, there have been documented sightings of alligators in drainage systems across the southern United States. In 2017, for instance, workers in Miami, Florida, were inspecting a storm drain when they came face-to-face with a 4-foot alligator wedged between two concrete walls. They had no idea how long it had been there or how it had gotten in, but it was very much alive. In Gainesville, a city known for its wildlife-rich wetlands and network of canals, animal control officers have had to extract gators from underground drainage systems multiple times. In some cases, the animals were found near residential neighborhoods. Others were discovered further down, navigating murky tunnels and surprising utility workers who were definitely not trained for that kind of encounter. In Orlando, during a particularly wet rainy season, residents reported hearing strange growls coming from storm drains. The reports sounded ridiculous until a sanitation crew found a 5-foot-long gator curled up beneath a sidewalk just a few blocks from a busy shopping district. These sightings are not urban legends. They are logged, photographed, verified by trained professionals, and they have consequences. After a few such incidents, some Florida cities began reviewing their drainage designs, installing additional safety grates, and updating emergency protocols for sewer workers. But here's the twist. None of these real encounters happen in New York. The temperature alone makes it nearly impossible for a cold-blooded reptile to survive a New York winter underground. Yet, the most famous sewer gator myth is set there. Not Florida, not Louisiana, not Texas. Why? Because legends are not always born from likelihood. They are born from impact. New York is a symbol of modern civilization. Towering steel, constant motion, millions of people, endless noise. The idea that beneath all that could slither a creature from another world is irresistible. And yet, It is in the quieter places, the swampy, subtropical regions of America, where the story inches closer to reality. This geographic mismatch makes the legend even more fascinating. The more it gets disproven in New York, the more people seem to believe it elsewhere, as though disproving it in one place somehow proves it in another. It also exposes something deeper, our love for fear that feels just out of reach. We do not want to believe a gator will crawl out of our toilet tomorrow. That would be horrifying. But believing one might exist somewhere out there, far away from us, that is the sweet spot. It gives us the thrill of danger without the actual danger. And when stories like the Miami and Gainesville gator sightings hit the news, they give new life to the myth. They blur the line between fiction and reality. Because once we have seen even one photograph of an alligator peering out of a dark tunnel, it becomes much harder to say with confidence that it could never happen again somewhere else. In fact, many animal control experts admit that small gators could survive short-term in sewer-like environments if they enter by accident, especially during floods or hurricanes, when drainage systems get overwhelmed and the boundaries between nature and infrastructure collapse. That moment, when the wild meets the man-made, is where the sewer gator finds its footing. And so, the myth feeds off reality. A real gator shows up in Florida. The New York legend gets a fresh coat of paint. A sewer worker snaps a blurry photo. Reddit explodes. A TikTok goes viral, showing a mysterious shadow in a tunnel. The views pile up. Even hoaxes serve the legend. A fake news story here. A doctored image there. They are quickly debunked, of course, but the seed is planted, and some seeds do not need sunlight to grow. They just need belief. There's something strangely poetic about it. A reptile, hiding in the dark, feeding on scraps, growing unnoticed. That is not just the plot of a monster movie. It is a metaphor for what we ignore, for what we choose not to see. And whether real or not, that idea feels powerful. Because the moment something could be real, it becomes a story we carry with us, in conversations, in jokes, in passing glances down into the storm drain as we walk to work. We do not need to see the gator. We just need to know the tunnel is there. And once in a while, wonder, why does the legend of sewer gators continue to survive, decade after decade, city after city, even after all the scientific explanations, urban studies, and logical arguments? The answer may not lie in the sewers. It may lie in us. From the beginning of time, human beings have created stories to explain what we fear. And more often than not, those stories take the shape of something lurking just out of sight, beneath the floorboards, behind the trees, or under the bed, or beneath the city. The sewer gator is not just a reptile. It is a mirror reflecting our discomfort with the parts of life we try not to think about. What lies below the surface? What have we built over and forgotten? Sewers themselves are already unsettling. They carry waste, physical, cultural, emotional. They represent what we flush away, what we do not want to deal with. They are the literal infrastructure of rejection. So when you take something dangerous like an alligator and place it in that setting, it becomes more than scary. It becomes symbolic, a symbol of what we ignore, a symbol of what might come back. Psychologists who study urban legends suggest that these kinds of myths survive because they allow people to feel in control of abstract fears. It is easy to talk about a gator in the sewer than about aging infrastructure. It is more exciting to imagine a monster than to acknowledge the real dangers of poor city planning, flooding, or sanitation issues. And this goes far beyond the gator. Think of other urban legends. The killer in the back seat, the man with a hook for a hand, the babysitter who gets mysterious calls from inside the house. These stories are not random. They are grounded in real, shared anxieties. Sewer gators are no different. They represent the fear that something dangerous might thrive because we neglected to deal with it, that something primitive, uninvited, might find its way into our most advanced spaces, that a city, for all its progress, might still be vulnerable from below. And this fear is amplified by the very nature of urban life. Cities are built on trust. We trust that the lights will stay on, that water will flow, that the ground we walk on is stable, that the systems we never see will continue working as they should. But every once in a while, that trust cracks. A sinkhole opens in the middle of the street. A subway floods. A strange smell wafts up from a manhole. And suddenly, the invisible becomes visible. In those moments, the legend rushes in. It says, "You were right to be afraid." Not a gator, maybe, but the fact that the world beneath your feet is not as secure as you thought, that it hides things, that it breathes without your permission. It is no coincidence that stories of sewer monsters surged during times of urban crisis. In the 1970s and 80s, New York faced high crime, deteriorating infrastructure, and political unrest. The city above was chaotic, and so the legend below thrived. People needed an outlet, a symbol, a scapegoat, something they could point to and say, "That's what's wrong down there." Of course, it was just a story, but in a way, that made it even more powerful, because stories can go where policies cannot. They move through people, between generations, unbound by fact. They grow, and legends that grow endure. What makes the sewer gator story especially interesting is that it requires very little to sustain it. Just one article, one grainy photo, one unconfirmed sighting. That is enough, because the sewer is always there. And as long as it is there, unexplored, unseen, and a little bit mysterious, the imagination will fill in the rest. This is not about irrational fear. It is about symbolic storytelling, a way of processing the unease that comes with living in a world too complex to fully understand. Even now, in the 21st century, with real-time surveillance, high-speed internet, and satellite maps, we still believe in monsters, not because we are foolish, but because part of us always will. Because sometimes the things we build to keep us safe, the pipes, the walls, the tunnels, also become places to hide what we are afraid to face. And so the legend continues, not because we see sewer gators every day, but because the story of them feels true. True in the way shadows feel longer at night. True in the way silence feels louder underground. True in the way we all occasionally pause at a drain cover and wonder, is something looking back? To understand the roots of the sewer gator myth, we have to understand the sewers themselves, not just as symbols, but as physical realities. Sewer systems are among the oldest and most essential components of any modern city. They are networks of tunnels, pipes, valves, and vents designed to handle one of the dirtiest jobs imaginable, managing human waste, stormwater, and runoff. Yet, because they do this work out of sight, they are rarely appreciated, and even more rarely understood. Let us take New York City as an example. New York's sewer system is massive. Over 6,000 miles of pipes and tunnels run beneath its streets. Some are wide enough to drive a truck through. Others, barely big enough for a rat to squeeze past. These tunnels snake beneath brownstones, skyscrapers, playgrounds, and subways, forming an underground mirror of the city above. Much of it was built over a century ago. In fact, parts of Manhattan's sewer infrastructure date back to the mid-1800s, before the Civil War. Back then, sanitation was less about science and more about survival. Cholera outbreaks, yellow fever, and other waterborne illnesses were ravaging cities. The need to move waste away from human life wasn't a matter of comfort. It was a matter of life and death. But as cities grew, so did the challenge. New tunnels were carved. Old ones were reinforced. Pumps were installed. Valves upgraded. Still, even with modern technology, maintenance has always been a game of catch-up. These systems are enormous, aging, and buried deep beneath layers of streets and buildings. Inspections are difficult. Repairs are expensive. And exploring them? Downright dangerous. And it is within this infrastructure, the forgotten, decaying, echoing underworld, that the idea of a hidden creature thrives. Imagine being a worker crawling through a century-old tunnel, your headlamp barely illuminating the path ahead. The air is thick, the walls drip, every sound bounces and multiplies in the narrow space. The splash of water, the skittering of rats, a distant metallic groan. It would not take much to believe that something else was down there with you. It is in this environment that legends are born. In fact, many of the earliest reports of sewer creatures came not from tourists or teenagers, but from workers, sanitation crews, utility repair teams, and maintenance personnel. People whose jobs place them face to face with the deepest parts of the city. Some told stories of seeing eyes in the dark. Others spoke of hearing hissing, sounds they could not explain. And while none of these accounts were verified, they were compelling because they came from people who had been there. These stories helped fuel the idea that something more lived underground, something not accounted for in the blueprints, a presence, a creature, a survivor. And let us not forget that sewer systems are not sealed. They are open systems. They connect to storm drains, canals, retention ponds, and natural bodies of water. In cities like Miami, New Orleans, or Houston, it is entirely plausible that wildlife, snakes, fish, even alligators, could find their way in during floods or heavy rains. That is the wrinkle that keeps the myth alive. Because even if alligators could not thrive in a sewer system, the chance that one could enter it, even for a moment, makes the legend difficult to completely dismiss. Some cities have documented wildlife appearing in the most unexpected places. Not just reptile, but possums, raccoons, foxes, even deer. There was a case in Los Angeles where a coyote emerged from a storm drain during rush hour traffic. In Chicago, a snapping turtle the size of a trash can lid was found blocking a culvert gate. These incidents may not be sewer gators, but they are close enough to reignite the question. If that animal made it down there, what else could? This kind of proximity between truth and tale is what legends feed on. They do not need to be proven. They just need to feel almost possible. And urban infrastructure provides a perfect backdrop. It is vast, dark, neglected, and mysterious. It is real but unknown, structured but unpredictable. We know it is down there, but we do not really know what is down there. So when someone says, there is a gator in the sewer, we do not laugh. We glance at the nearest manhole cover. We pause. We wonder. Because in the complex maze of underground cities, where steel meets slime and time meets neglect, our fear finds a place to grow. And even the best engineers cannot seal off the imagination. Although the legend of the sewer gator is deeply tied to American culture, especially cities like New York and Miami, the idea of creatures lurking beneath modern civilization is not unique to the United States. In fact, nearly every culture has its own version of the same unsettling question: what's hiding just beneath our feet? Let's take a step beyond American borders for a moment. In London, for example, stories of subterranean life go back centuries. During the Victorian era, when the Thames River was so polluted it was referred to as the Great Stink, rumors began to circulate that strange animals were adapting to life in the newly built sewer system. Rats the size of dogs, snakes escaping through toilets, even tales of strange humanoid creatures, perhaps former workers lost in a labyrinth of tunnels, slowly transformed by darkness. These myths intensified during World War II, when bombings forced many Londoners into underground shelters and subway stations. The tunnels below the city took on a new identity, not just as a refuge, but as a place of danger, of mystery, and of silence. Stories of ghosts and underground beasts became common. The psychological stress of war, combined with the claustrophobic environment, gave birth to new urban legends. In Paris, the catacombs offer a different flavor of underground fear. Stretching over 200 miles beneath the city, these former quarries became ossuaries, resting places for more than 6 million skeletons. While technically not part of the sewer system, the catacombs are still part of Paris's vast underground network. Over the years, countless myths have developed about what roams those tunnels. Secret cults, albino spiders, people who enter and never return. In fact, footage was discovered in the 1990s of a camcorder found deep within the Paris catacombs. Its final images showing a man wandering through the dark in a panic. The identity of the man was never confirmed. The mystery added fuel to the already chilling legends of what lies below. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, sewer systems have inspired their own eerie stories. Japan's extensive tunnel networks, both for water and transportation, have become the backdrop for dozens of horror films and manga. Creatures like the Gashidakuro, giant skeletal beings said to haunt empty roads and sewers, emerge from folklore into modern settings. Even more grounded tales, such as those involving giant sewer rats or mutated fish, have surfaced in urban conversations. And in India, where massive urban populations and older drainage systems collide, tales of snakes emerging from toilets are not uncommon. Some of these are rooted in fact. Real cobras or pythons do sometimes find their way into plumbing during monsoon season. But once these stories hit local news, they often spiral into full-fledged legends of cursed homes or spirits living in the pipes. What does all this tell us? That the fear of the underground is not just American. It is human. It stems from a natural unease about spaces we cannot see, places that exist just beneath the surface of our lives, yet remain largely out of reach. They are dark, damp, and unpredictable. They feel alive. And when we combine that mystery with the presence of wild animals, folklore, or even just the passage of time, we get legends. The sewer gator, then, is not just an American creation. It is part of a global pattern. Civilizations projecting their fears into the shadows of their own systems. What is particularly American about the sewer gator is how the legend formed. Intertwined with consumer culture, the rise of the exotic pet industry, and the explosion of mass media. In countries where underground tunnels predate electricity, myths tend to lean towards spirits, curses, and ancient beings. In America, it becomes a mutated reptile, a byproduct of careless human behavior, scientific experimentation, or pollution. It is not just a monster. It is a consequence. That detail matters. Because while many urban myths portray the underground as a supernatural realm, the sewer gator is more grounded. It suggests that we created the problem, that we introduced the creature, that flushing something down the toilet could spiral into something monstrous. It is a uniquely modern fear, that the systems meant to contain and control the messy parts of life might fail, and that something dangerous might emerge within them. And that theme, too, resonates globally. From the rat kings of Germany to the tunnel ghosts of Seoul, urban legends about what hides below are everywhere. But few have the staying power, the pop culture reach, or the uniquely American flair of the sewer gator. Because it is simple, it is weird, it is possible, and that's all it needs to be remembered. At some point, every legend faces a reckoning. For the tale of the sewer gator, that reckoning has come multiple times. Scientists, biologists, engineers, and even sewer maintenance workers have all weighed in over the years. Try put the rumors to rest once and for all. They present facts. They cite studies. They speak with authority. And yet, the story survives. So, what exactly do the experts say? Let's begin with the biology. Alligators are cold-blooded reptiles. This means they rely on external sources of heat, sunlight, and warm environments to regulate their body temperature. In the frigid, dark tunnels of New York sewer systems, especially during the long winter months, an alligator would quickly become sluggish, stop eating, and eventually die. Second, food sources. While rats are abundant in sewers, they are not easy prey. Alligators rely on ambush precision and bursts of energy to hunt. The cluttered, fast-moving, and unpredictable environment of a sewer is a poor place for a predator that prefers still water and open marshes. Third, oxygen and light. Alligators surface regularly to breathe. They can hold their breath for up to an hour, but prolonged submersion is not sustainable. Sewers are not open bodies of water. They are low in oxygen, and the enclosed nature of the tunnels can cause disorientation. Add to that the near-total absence of sunlight, which can impair their health, and survival becomes unlikely. Finally, waste and toxins. Sewer water is filled with chemicals, detergents, grease, and human waste. Prolonged exposure to this cocktail would cause severe stress to any animal, let alone one not adapted to such an environment. So, based on everything we know, no, an alligator cannot live and thrive in a sewer system for long periods of time. It may survive for a short while, especially if it is small and recently introduced. But long-term survival, let alone the kind of massive, mutated creatures described in legends, scientifically implausible. And yet, the story remains alive. Why? Because facts don't always kill stories, especially stories that satisfy something deeper. In a strange way, the legend of the sewer gator needs a debunking to stay alive. Every time an expert says, "This isn't possible," it triggers curiosity. People want to know why it's impossible. They start digging. They read the original newspaper clippings. They watch YouTube documentaries. They explore the tunnels through Google Maps. And the myth continues to breathe. In this sense, science becomes part of the story. It acts not as a terminator, but as a foil, something for the legend to wrestle with, something for believers to push against. Every urban legend walks this line. Too much credibility, and it becomes a news report. Too much fiction, and it fades into fantasy. But when a story is just believable enough to spark doubt, it lives forever. There is also the factor of misidentification. People do see strange things in the dark. A large rat scurrying through the water can look like a gator tail. A pipe sticking out of a wall can resemble a snout. The brain fills in gaps. It wants to understand. And in a space like a sewer, where vision is limited and sounds echo, the mind becomes a co-author of a legend. Then there's the issue of media amplification. One article, one viral post, one TikTok with blurry footage. That is all it takes. A manhole rattles. A shape moves in the water. A tail flicks into shadow. Suddenly, the hashtag sewer gator starts trending. Comments flood in. Some joke. Some claim to have seen one too. Some scream fake. Others scream cover up. But they all talk, and the legend grows. Modern science, for all its progress, cannot fully compete with the power of collective imagination. Not when the story is this fun, this simple, this easy to tell at a campfire or over a drink. Because in the end, the sewer gator is not about science. It is about belief. The belief that the world still holds mysteries. That not everything can be explained by graphs and charts. That in the age of surveillance, satellites, and supercomputers, some things might still be hiding. And as long as people continue to wonder, as long as there are tunnels we have not explored, as long as a child dares to look into a storm drain and shiver, the sewer gator will never truly die. Because science may close the book, but legends keep turning the page. So, after everything we have explored, the biology, the infrastructure, the media, the history, where does that leave us? Do sewer gators exist? Probably not. But do they matter? Absolutely. The story of the sewer gator is not just about a reptile in a tunnel. It is about how we process mystery in a world that seems to have less and less of it. It is about how urban life, for all its structure and science, still creates gaps where the imagination takes root and flourishes. In an age when information is instant and answers are everywhere, there is something deeply human about preserving a piece of uncertainty. We want some stories to remain unsolved. We like that there are places we have not explored, things we have not proven, mysteries we have not untangled. The sewer gator is one of those stories. It represents a quiet rebellion against the cold precision of modern life. It reminds us that even under concrete and steel, beneath the well-lit streets and predictable systems, there might still be something wild, something older than the city itself, something watching, waiting, breathing. And this idea persists not just because it is scary, but because it is oddly comforting. Because deep down, we all wonder what exists beyond our line of sight. We all want to believe that there is more to our cities, more to our world, more to reality than what can be measured by thermometers and drainage reports. The sewer gator embodies that longing. It teaches us that even in places built to control chaos, like sewers, chaos might still find a way in. And when paired with media, it becomes immortal. Future generations may never read the original 1935 article in the New York Times. They might not know about the boys in Harlem who claimed to see something writhing in the water, but they will see the memes, the cartoons, the videos, the whispers, because legends mutate. They adapt. They survive. And as long as someone somewhere points to a drain pipe and says, "That's where it lives," the sewer gator lives on. So the next time you are walking through the streets of any city, look down, not because you expect to see a monster, but because you understand what it represents. A fear of the forgotten, a fascination with the hidden, a reminder that even in a world of endless data, there is still room for mystery, that somewhere in the wet, echoing dark of an underground tunnel between the dripping pipes and rusted walls, a legend is waiting, not for you to prove it wrong, but simply for you to believe.